Hey guys, this is Pastor John coming to you for episode number 17 for the Inverted Podcast. Welcome in. Today we have a special guest, Pastor Mike Fritscher from where. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Mike.
So born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana, called very young, like 10 years old.
Right.
And just raised in a really great church, great place. And now I pastor Cottonwood Baptist Church, or Cottonwood Church, outside of Dublin, Texas.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's a joy to have you. Today's podcast is called Finding Your Paul or Paulette, right? Depending on where you are in the sense of finding those spiritual mentors. I wrote this down. It said the average length of service for pastors in Protestant churches in America is down to about 4 years.
Uh-huh.
How many years have you been at Cottonwood?
They just celebrated my 40 years.
40.
I've been there 40 years.
Started at about 5 years old there as pastor of the church.
I was 25. I'm 65 now.
Oh my goodness. Well, it is. Where did we first meet? Back in the day,
I think probably school,
yes.
High school, junior high. I don't know. I mean, I was a substitute taught when I first came out here and finished seminary. So 87, 86, 87, 88. Right. I don't know what grade you would have been.
I don't remember. I do remember this. I remember you being a sub, and all the girls thought you were the most handsome looking guy ever. So all of us high school guys, junior high guys didn't like you because all the girls did. So
I would it's funny because I would just go in and I'd bring my Bible. And
I remember.
Hey, just keep it down to a minimum roar.
Yes.
And you can just talk and do that and do what you need to do, get your work done and leave me alone.
And so, because you had seminary stuff to do too, right?
No, okay. I didn't. I never said leave me alone.
Okay.
So
well,
it's good.
I remember those days. It was always a joy to have you and as a sub, but where all this started for me, Pauls have always been important in my life, and we'll talk more about it in a second. But I was at King Coffee one day, and Christy's like, hey, Pastor Mike would love to say hi to you. And I was like, okay, and went over to say hi to you. And then God just really got a hold of my heart. It's like, man, this is the guy that I need in my life because I don't have a Paul here. And someone that's been at the same church for 40 years, either speaking of integrity, doesn't mean you've been perfect by any means. None of us are, but someone that's been consistent over the years. And I don't know if you found this unique, but for me, it was easier to find Pauls in places that you didn't really know anyone.
Yeah, that's right.
But coming back home, so to speak, I knew I needed one and I was drowning. And we met at Starbucks one day I said, hey, I need this. And Pastor Mike, I'll never forget walking away from that meeting that day. I was so encouraged and empowered by the words that you spoke over me, mostly scripture, because I didn't have to walk away or walk into the meeting. There was no expectation.
Yeah, that's right.
And it was, and a lot of time as pastors, right?
Right.
Every place we go to, every person we talk to, there's an expectation.
Sure.
And I sat there and there was nothing expected of me. So I want to thank you for being my Paul.
Oh, you bet.
It is a joy. I talk about you a lot here. But today's podcast is Finding Your Paul. It says within the scriptures, there tend to be thoughts that there are three types of folks within your life. There's a Timothy, which is a learner, a Paul, the teacher, and a Barnabas, the encourager. What would you say is a good definition for a Paul in your life?
Well, I think ahead of you, okay? They're ahead of you in growth as far as maturity as a believer. John talks about 4 different kinds of people in the church. He says little children, which are infants, children, young men who overcome the enemy, and then fathers.
Okay.
And so I think in a lot of ways, even though a man might be young and still be a Paul, I really think just kind of like a father in the ministry, which does, father biologically could be 18, right?
Right. That's true. That's exactly right.
So we're not looking at just, we're looking at a maturity. reproducible.
Okay.
You know, that's what I would say would be
Okay.
a Paul. Someone with experience, someone
Okay.
with experience that has been tough, hard, good.
Mm-hmm. Endured over time.
Yeah.
Do you ever outgrow a Paul in your life? Is there a time that you become a Paul and there's no other Pauls that you...
Well, I know that, you know, for many years, for me, I've had elders in my life.
Yes.
Back 20-something years ago, we instituted an elder-led ministry.
Right.
Those guys have really been stout for
Yes.
me. And although they would consider me their Paul,
Right.
I mean, it's kind of a mutual thing. So I think you get to a place of mutuality.
Okay.
So does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like also my staff's been with, you know, Scott's been with me 33 years and
Right.
Chance 25 and Craig 25 doing missional things. And so we become kind of partners in
Right.
ministry. So it's
Right.
like the team.
So
like
I'm glad you
Paul and
said that.
Silas, you know?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah.
So Barnabas is the encourager, right?
Yeah.
What's the difference between then that person that's an encourager and that person that may be a Paul? Are they interchangeable?
Well, I think they are because, you know, Barnabas just means son of the encourager. Okay.
Yes,
So that's
yes.
what it means. But he was in many ways an apostle too.
Right.
He was a church planter. He was partner to Paul. I think there's a mutuality when you get a little bit older that you just kind of walk in sync with,
Right.
you know, for me, I just, you know, through the years, I've really, you know, I mean, I think sometimes just trying to plug into people
Yes.
and be available for people, you know,
Right.
is something that I just feel like if I ever tried to make it happen, it never happened, you
Okay.
know?
Yes. Yes.
And I think also having a staff and elders that have been with me this long,
Mhm.
there is a quite of a satisfaction of seeing those kinds of guys being encouragers,
Yes.
you know, come alongside, courage, you know, just, you know, not blow you up as far as, but just, man, thank you for that.
Yes.
You know, thank you for this being in my life.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, and then you've got people that may not be theologically, but they got so much experience.
Right.
They've got ministry experience in the workplace, you know, using their ministries as platforms.
Yes.
So you just learn to learn from people, you know?
Well, let's speak for the Pauls first.
Okay.
If you're a Paul, then you have a Timothy, you have a learner, right? You have someone that is sitting there with you. How many Timothys are too many?
You know, it's just interesting because it's like, you know, I'd never have, you know, considered myself a Paul. Or
Okay.
I've never named myself
Well,
like that.
I've named you a Paul.
You have named me a Paul. And you're the first one in my life, and I'm 65 years old, you know. But it's not so much what you name it, it's the principle. You know, it's the principle of having somebody that you can trust, somebody that you can be a confidant to, somebody that says, hey, I'm struggling with this, and you know, it doesn't go any further.
Yes.
You know, I think also just, you know, like for you, you know, you're in a tremendous transition, right? Of moving through culture of a church and really desire, you know, having your own fingerprint on it and your team's fingerprint on it, right?
Yes.
And so, you know, I think in that kind of term is, you know, I've gone through lots of transitions, you know, at the same church.
Right.
And, you know, we went from, you know, 20 people to then from a deacon ministry to staff led to elder led to from, you know, we went from 4 hymns to, you know, total band with the 70-year-old woman leader who'd been there since she was 16 leading in front of a full band, you know? And so just those kind of transitions and how we weathered those and how we navigated through them, you know, I think is helpful. I didn't have anybody to tell me how to do that.
Well, thank you for blazing the trail.
I mean, you've come into a church that's not traditional. It's very, very, you know, non-traditional as far, unless you're becoming traditional and you're non-traditional. And then, you know, then that's what, then you got to start doing something about that, right?
Yes.
So, yeah.
How about this question? Can a person can there be two different sexes? Can there be a male Paul and a female Timothy?
Yeah, absolutely. This is older women teaching younger women.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Yes.
It's and then you have couples like.
Okay. But can you have a female that's a Timothy? Would you stray away from that?
I would stray away from that.
Okay.
It would have to be couples.
Okay, perfect.
I just think in terms of just moving through that, and I don't know. It's just a confidant for a woman, someone else's wife, a single. I mean, I just kind of, I don't know. I would feel very uncomfortable.
That's one of the things. And, I was reminded when I came in here and I told, Emma again, I was like, hey, we're doing this Finding Your Paul. And she's like, and Paulette. So, that terminology is being used out there in that language. So coming back to the number is just
I don't know. I mean, it's just like, I would consider everyone in my staff has been a Timothy at some point.
Yes.
Okay. All of them.
Right.
Where I've, discipled, walked through deliverance, walked through freedom.
Yes.
They're ignited to ministry and they start doing it. And then we make a way for them to be paid to do it.
Yes.
And, I was at the, at the anniversary, we had two elders that stood up, and I just, one of them was, talked about being led to the Lord and discipled and walked through deliverance. And it just stunned me because I don't, I haven't thought of that until he'd said it. Yeah. And here he is, an elder.
That's awesome.
That is very, very valuable because he speaks his mind.
Yes.
And he's not a yes man.
Right.
And he's one of, and I trust him, and I can be questioned. Yes. Hey, what do you think about this situation? We haven't taken care of this.
Yes.
And I mean, you're exactly right. And to have that kind of teachability of, and not be offended, or because they have my back.
Right.
And I tell people from the very beginning of elder ministry, I knew within the first 6 months that when I'm in elders, I'm in the safest place on earth.
Yes, I agree.
And not many pastors can say that.
Because you can be truly yourself. Not that you're not truly yourself other places, but you just feel safe.
I think the safe place is that they love me, they have my back, they're not going to be a yes man.
Right. Yes.
And that's safe.
That is safe.
That is safe.
But very few people step into that. A lot of people want yes people around them, but it's never benefited me. Some of the closest relationships I have in my life are those that got in my face in a loving way, and I've trusted them. Yeah. And they're the first person I call when there's something going on in my life. How about a Paul? What does it look like? And we're still speaking to the Paul for a second. If you're a Paul, is it you open the Bible and you read through the book of Leviticus together?
No, I think when you get to the place of ministry, the Paul is there, in my opinion, not for theological discussion or truth, but ministry.
Yes.
And how do I weather through this one? Because, there's just things that happen through the years that are really, really tough.
Right.
How do you weather through an adultery case?
Right. Right. Yes.
Man, I mean, how do you weather through just a staff issue that, that needs discipline and taken off for a season, not to kick them out, not to kick them off, but just to say, hey, you're going to need to take a season here.
Right.
And so we've had those kinds of things, and I've needed elders to help make that decision.
Right.
And so in that way, I love it because it's like, sometimes, as we move through our relationship, hopefully through the years, there'll be times that I'm a Timothy. I'm asking you questions about some things that I really need to know about, in ministry.
Right.
I mean, your expertise on the missional piece and those kinds of things.
Yes.
And so I think it's, there's a camaraderie about it that just kind of fluctuates and moves.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
And so, and so you ask how many Timothys. I mean, gosh, I just was, I got a glimpse of it when he started asking questions. How many people were here then, and how many of you how many of you have Mike's led to the Lord, or how many have led through deliverance or freedom? And I just was stunned by the hands because I don't I go on to the next thing.
Yes.
Right. And they're grateful because some people confess some really hard stuff and they want me to forget.
Right.
They don't want me to remember, right? And I don't want to remember either. And God's given me a really great ability for that.
How about a person that maybe isn't in ministry, just a lay person or person that's just, goes to work every day, and they're a Paul to Timothy's out there? Is it teaching someone how to live out being a husband, how to be a wife, how to whatever? Yes,
absolutely. So there is that. I mean, where you have men who, especially when I see men come alongside other men and disciple, teach quiet time, teach witnessing techniques, teaching those kinds of discipleship things. And yet they're businessmen,
right?
And they're doing this in their offices, and they're leading. They've got this platform of ministry,
right,
where it's Christ-centered.
Yes.
And if you have a Christ-centered business and that's what you're going to want, then you can't help but minister to people, bring people along, not just career-wise for your business, but also spiritual. Right?
I don't know if have you seen The Forge? Have you seen that movie?
I have seen it. It was really, really good.
Yeah,
I was very moved by it.
We have more college students come in here and say, "Hey, I just saw The Forge. I need someone." And that's really exciting. But that makes you think, what should a person look for again in a Paul? If there's a Timothy listening to this, or if there's someone that's out there that's wanting to learn and grow, what do you look for in
I think you look for somebody who's been where you are.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're a pastor, you need to look for a veteran pastor who is where you've been. And I would try to find somebody that's kind of in the same kind of tradition, same kind of transitions, those kinds of things, And I think the other thing is mainly pastors usually called me when they were in trouble.
Yes.
With somebody,
right?
And they were, that's usually what I get. I don't get what I get from you,
right?
Hardly at all. It's how do I weather this? Well, thing is, it's by the time they come to me, it's like it's a mess. I mean, it's at a place where, and so. I can't think of it right now, but I know there's been some times of just trying to mediate for folks, that's tough when it gets to that place,
Yes. Why don't you think people seek out a Paul or a Paulette, those that are mentoring them? Why have you seen a shift over the 40 years? Was there people more are hungrier for those mentors in their life?
I think that just people, I think pastors see themselves as an island.
Okay.
And they've just got to keep their head down and go.
Right.
And then there's also the vulnerability piece. How can I be vulnerable? So there's a pride issue here.
Yes.
Right. I don't know. I mean, I've seen it.
Okay. Okay.
I've always, as I've moved through, especially in the early years, I had some guys come alongside me. When I also had guys that were coming against me.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. It's small town, the church is growing.
Yes.
Got a couple came from yours.
Yes.
And, and so just how to weather that or navigate, it's really hard.
That's really good.
And you just get that.
Yeah.
And I just think I've had some guys. I had a guy his name was Jan Daynert, and Jan Daynert was the kind of guy. He was he was with Texas Baptist, and he was small church bivocational,
right?
And he came to an associational event, pastor event, and I got to meet him, and we started spending time. And he was just a great encouragement. He's one of those guys. That that guy really likes me. And then I watch him go to that guy and go, he likes him too. He's generally the Barnabas, that has just been there, right? Would be my dad's age. He's in his 80s now, and he's just a blessing,
And so a week to week, like if we step outside of the ministry, I would call it professional ministry, where the pastor role, just the everyday person, like not taking away from who that person is, but maybe they're not full-time in a church. They're going to work, or maybe they're a college student. They're about to graduate, and what does discipleship, being a Paul or Paulette to that person, meeting once a week, and what do they talk about? Should there be a plan?
To me, since I'm a spontaneous guy,
yeah, me too.
I just don't. If I do a plan, I'm off of it in 3 weeks. Okay. If I try to preach through a book in the Bible, I'm done in 3 weeks.
Right.
Okay. And I've learned that.
Yes.
Right. And so my favorite thing is just to ask people, what's your question? Come with your question.
Right.
Or is there an experience right now that you're just needing input in?
Yes.
What are the needs of the moment?
Right.
Right. Because, that's where we're at.
Mm-hmm.
We're in the moment. Right.
Yes.
And so now when you look at discipleship and bringing people through from, lost to saved through baby, infant style,
yes.
and, those are just the basics, And sometimes, I have people that can do that.
Right.
And sometimes I do it,
yes.
And
yes.
teach, open the word and teach a little bit about the Bible and what the Bible is, and Old Testament, New Testament, how many books, all those things. And just overviews. And then this is how we do, this is how God has used me in the very beginning when I was 14 years old.
Mm-hmm.
This is how I started, and I started with, here's the text. I read it, and what is it saying? And I write it down what it's saying, and what is it saying to me? And
yes.
Is there anything action to it for the day?
That's good.
Real simple, simplicity
Simple.
of it. And really, I still do that,
right.
Right. Is it a word to believe, a word to obey, a word to, repent?
Right.
Is it a rebuke? What's going on here? Because, really scripture says, if you hear the word and do the word, you build your life on the rock.
Right. Right.
So that when the storms come, your house stands because your foundation's on the rock, Jesus, right? Yes. And then if you hear the word and you don't do it, you're a fool. Mm-hmm. You build your house on the sand.
Yeah.
And I actually preached this Sunday, and some commentators believe that the sand is a wadi. I don't know if you ever heard of wadi.
No.
So a wadi is a riverbed that's a drainage place. Okay. And I had these pictures of these wadis in the Middle East, especially in Israel. There's not many places you find sand.
Right.
It's very rocky, swirly. There's fertile ground and all that, but you don't find much sand. And where you find the sand is in these big old wadis. And so it's like the fool builds his house on the wadi. So when the rains come, well, we haven't seen rain here. We haven't seen we haven't seen water in this thing since I've been alive. So I think I'd like to put a house right here. And they call that a fool. Okay. So what happens is that I think, what are the things, especially with character? Okay, so character development, right?
Yes.
We talk about character development. We talk about skill sets.
Yes.
We talk about community, right? Those are the kinds of things that usually come up when we're talking about where the younger guy is experiencing right now.
Yes. What is the most difficult part of being a Paul to someone?
I don't know. I think for me, it would be just guys who have come, that I wouldn't say I was a Paul because they didn't have that kind of relationship, but just things that I really believe that are scriptural and how to respond to the problem, and they don't do that.
Yes.
So a gentle answer turns away wrath, right? The anger of a man doesn't accomplish the righteousness of God. So get rid of your anger.
Yes.
You got to walk in forgiveness of this deacon and his wife.
Right.
And if you don't, it's going to kill you.
And the longer two people meet, the more relational they'll be.
That's correct.
And so what might be, do you ever find a struggle, or have you ever seen a struggle where people become so relational that it becomes more of an encouragement and not, although one person may be beyond them, not not in head knowledge, but in their walk with Jesus.
Yeah.
But it becomes difficult to speak into where they're at because you become mutual, friends instead of just that mentoring.
I think so, but I also have really good friends that I would consider,
right,
that I would come to and
Mm-hmm.
to ask, the appropriate questions. And I think for me, I think about my first mentor of Paul, Mike Walker, our youth pastor. I was 14 years old. He'd just come to New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary and just vested 3 years of his life in me, And, now he grew a church in Lafayette, Louisiana, and his son has taken it. And he's in a kind of emeritus role, but not really,
Yes.
And so, I think back then, he's spoken in my life.
Mm-hmm.
He, took me witnessing. I saw him witness. So I learned it,
Just doing life together.
And watching.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember reading The Purpose-Driven Student Ministry by Doug Fields way back in the day. And he talked about just picking people up, and, his wife specifically, and young women would go shopping with her and just hang out with her. And that's that relational. How about this question? Let's say you have a Paul and they fall.
Yeah.
They choose, all of a sudden you find out, oh my gosh, they're cheating on their wife or cheating on their husband, and they've had
embezzling money.
Yeah. Or, who knows what. And it's like, what advice do you give to that person being mentored that has a tendency to are you kidding me? I mean, we spent together 2 years together.
Yeah. So I think it just depends. I think that just in that moment, if there's things that I saw that, and that was a red flag, I saw him, and I pass it off,
right?
I think also that you're always going to want to default to grace.
Yes, that's good.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And to extend it, right? I've been meditating on compassion and talking about compassion, meditating on compassion, igniting the work of God.
Right.
So when you look at when God passed by Moses and declared his glory, first thing he said was compassionate.
Right.
And everything else after it.
Yes.
Gracious. So he extends grace. Mm-hmm. He's slow to anger. So he's patient, extending patience. Right. Full of love and truth, loving kindness and truth, mercy, grace. Forgives iniquity, transgression, and sin. Mm-hmm. So compassion ignites that work.
Right.
And I really feel like you have to default to that.
Okay.
But this next thing is just how do I watch that Paul respond?
Yes.
Okay. Does he cover? Does he?
Okay.
What does he do in this heat of the moment?
All right.
How does he protect himself?
Mm-hmm.
How does he? As things come to light, how true is it? Right. How not true is it? Mm-hmm. And you just really don't want to make a judgment.
Right.
You really don't.
What about?
And that's never happened to me, so that's a very hypothetical.
Yeah. What about if let's say there's two mentors meeting, and there's a Paul and Timothy or Paulette. We've never given Timothy a female name, so Timothea, yeah. What in the Timothy or the Timothy, men? They're are they free to speak into the Paul's life?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
Absolutely.
I that's my heart, and definitely. Yeah. But I think sometimes when people think, "Oh my goodness, I see this," you're responsible for it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
And I think that, the thing is if especially those on staff, okay, especially those on staff, the young guys, you know, if they don't have the freedom to ask me something they're concerned about, I'm not a very good pastor.
Right. So true.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So there's got to be a, freedom.
Okay.
And, I just think in those terms of but they've got to be careful in rebuking an older man.
Yes.
The scripture says, do not rebuke an older man. Mm-hmm. Right. try to correct.
Right.
This is an appeal.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that says, hey, this is what's going on.
Right.
What do you think? I've had that. And I've had something, you're right.
Yes. Right.
Forgive me for that.
I've had that. Know? I've had that here in the last year and a half.
Oh, yeah.
Times. Yes. Yeah. And it builds trust, and you understand what the team is at a greater level. For reasons of the camera heating up, we're gonna slow it down. Our guest speeded up quickly with the fact of this. What if there's a person out there, male or female, and they're ready to take that next step in finding a mentor for themselves? Yeah. What do they do?
Gosh, well, what did you do?
Yeah, that's right. Okay. I listened to my wife.
So I think number one is there's got to be a conviction that says, I need somebody.
Right.
I can't keep doing this alone.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
And I need somebody out of my circle right now. Okay. I think that's the first thing. And then the second thing is you've got to seek the Lord. You got to ask the Lord. I mean, it's so novel, right?
Right.
Well, I'm going to pray about it. I want to ask God to lead me and guide me and to prompt me on who that might be in my life.
Right.
Because if God is the one prompting you for that, I think he's going to lead you to that. And I don't want to, I don't want to make it difficult. You don't have 6 steps. It's just, you know what? I cry out to God. I ask him to do this and he's going to do it. So, why would he not do that?
Right. And so for Emma that's sitting in the room and recording this and helping us out, let's say that she's seeking someone out.
Yeah.
So she gets to point step 2. And I know you said there's not steps in it, but then that person she sees, and then she goes and says, hey, can you mentor me?
Yeah.
Or can,
absolutely.
And then just start meeting.
Or I think even just, could I get to know you?
Yeah.
Could I ask you a couple of questions?
Right. That's probably good, because they appear to be what you think they are after you spend a couple of times with them.
I wish I wouldn't have said I'm looking for a Paulette.
Give a chance to exit.
Don't let them know you're looking for a Paulette. No, I mean, I think by that time that person can be pretty sure, right? Because there's relationship. You see that, I just think in terms of just, again, I'm seeking the Lord in this. I'm needing people in my life. I'm needing some, older men, older women to speak into my life. That's all this is.
Right.
It's people, allowing people to speak into your life.
Yes.
And it's more of a community life on life thing. It's not, we're going to go to the grease board today, John, and I'm going to tell you how to do 1, 2, and 3. That's just crazy.
But wasn't that what it was back in the day earlier in church? It was a 6-week process of hey, now you've graduated.
Yeah. I just know that the guys in my life. So George Fazell was my pastor when I was 8 years old. And I remember the very first time he came to our house.
Right.
And my sister was a little bitty. She was not even walking yet. And he was a big old huge guy. And she kind of was walking over his big old shoes. And I'm thinking he's had size 14, 15 shoes.
Wow.
I mean, it's huge.
Yeah.
And he made this comment, and I don't remember it, but it was sweet. It was funny. It was fun,
right.
I learned a whole lot as a child of how a godly man relates to a child.
That's good.
And how he can,
right.
mess with you a little bit, have fun with you a little bit. And, he led me to the Lord at 8,
awesome.
I rode my little bike down the street and I had some questions and some things stirred in my heart, led me in the Lord. And I mean, he loved us. I mean, he loved us. He loved well, And so I think those are the kinds of things, even as a child, looking back, how he taught me how to engage children in a very appropriate, very, public way,
right. How about this quickly, as a parent, and I'm still a parent of 2 17-year-olds, and a 23-year-old, but she's out on her own for sure. Do you feel weight that you have to be your kid's Paul
Oh, no.
or Paulette?
No.
Or when they're
No.
in junior high school,
No.
you're excited about other people journeying alongside.
Gosh, yeah, I mean, they need it.
Yes.
Because they see me all the time.
Because I think
And
sometimes parents feel guilty.
It can be too familiar.
Yes, yes.
And we were homeschooling, and we didn't have many people coming when they were growing up. And so we lived on the place, and they were in and out.
Right.
And, and I got to do the fun things with them as well as the discipline things. And, I mean, you have, gosh, especially in the younger years, you have the prayer times and the Bible study, and you got, we're homeschooling. So my wife's teaching Bible, teaching word and doing those things. And, like Tatum, who's 15, I don't know if you saw him.
I did. I did see.
He did the keynote for that. And, he's reached out to guys. There's an elder that meets with him who's a police officer and has a ministry, a national ministry. He's written 10 books on devotionals for cops.
That's really good.
And so he is speaking into his life. And then I, of course, our youth director. Yes. Well, I don't have him doing it. They just do it, And he's also on the platform, and he'll be the lead worship leader for youth. So he spends time with Lance.
That's really good.
So he's got a ton of, there's a ton of opportunities in our churches for this.
Yes.
There's a ton of opportunities in this church, a ton of opportunities in our church. And, and so I think in terms of, the other thing I want to just say is my prayer is, like, as we meet, is that it's just stuff we both catch.
Yes.
We catch it.
I'm catching stuff.
Not taught.
Yeah,
taught,
that's it.
And so that's what kids. That's why I'm going to get to my kids. My kids have to catch it.
So if you're a mom or dad listening or watching, and you feel the weight that you have to be that spiritual mentor, no, there's many others out there.
There is.
Okay, good.
Because there's just things that, there's just different life experiences.
Yes, I agree.
Each kid is wired differently, and some of them aren't wired like you.
Yes,
I've got one wired like me, and the other two aren't.
That's for sure. Okay, we're wrapping it up. With that said, I would love for you to speak into the camera to the encouragement of someone who is a Paul to people right now. Yeah. What encouragement would you give them? The everyday person?
Yeah. So it's the principle of sowing and reaping. Okay. What you sow is what you reap, right? So that's character-wise, that's ministry-wise, emotionally, and so I just think in terms of just the old thought of the sower sowing the seed for evangelism, but he's also sowing seed into your heart. And that's what this is. It's just sowing seed, sowing words, sowing experience, sowing life. And then you're getting that back, And then I think the other thing is, for me, for years, I'd always heard, his leadership is getting people from A to B.
Right.
And it's great, but I really believe, God just showed me something one day. It was just an aha moment. I don't want to lead you from A to B. I want to love you from A to B.
That's really good.
It's a great definition of leadership.
You get faces from her sometimes, and when you get those faces, that's when we know, and it's good.
How do I love my people? Like for you, okay? This is not just you, so it's everyone. But for you, when I know it's the appointment set, my big concern is how do I love this man to the places God wants you to be? Whether it's as a husband today, or a dad, or a mom, or a pastor, or a brother, or a son, or just a man, you know?
Yes.
And I just think in terms of that's just what it's igniting me, because it's like, it's a compassion that's not pity. Okay. No, it's a compassion that just is affectionate, phileo, brotherly kind of love, And the thing is that when you sow into people's lives and they reap, you're reaping, you're reaping the benefit of just what is John speaking into my life today that he doesn't realize happening.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it's mutual, John. It's mutual.
Well, it is. It is. And I, Pastor Mike, I would have, going back to junior high and high school.
Yeah.
who would ever thought we'd be in a podcast room in Stephenville,
yeah, that's right.
you know, doing what we do. But I want to thank you for your commitment, your dedication, your surrender, your continued surrender. 40 years, not many people get that at one church, especially.
Yeah, that's right.
And so thank you for being an example that I can follow. And I'm humbled to be a friend, but also your Timothy. And
well, we've just done it 5 times, John.
That's true.
So
that's
we've
true.
got, you know, it's just been 5 times.
Yes. But after doing it that first time, I was empowered to come back and say, hey, you have to find that person, you know, and not to lead from point A to point B, but to love from point A to point B. Because I felt that day.
I'm so glad.
And that's exactly what I needed.
Awesome.
Well, thank you for joining us for the Inverted Podcast. Send any information or, email info@timberridgechurch.com if you have any questions. Go out and find the Paul, continue to be the Paul. And we thank you for joining us and we'll be back next time. Thank you.